You already know what time it is. Welcome back into the NFL with AJL, episode 79. We're live on back-to-back days. We were here Tuesday, and we're here again on Wednesday with the college football talk. Y'all could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're right here tapped in with us on the show. As you already know, I got my brother Alan Spradlin tapped in with us for the AA, as we do every single week, to be able to tackle this college football content. But as always, before we jump in, y'all please make sure to like and share the stream wherever you may be watching. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. We're almost to 1,000 subs to get to that full level of monetization as well. The QR code there on Alan's corner of the screen will give you every bit of that social media and podcast content. If you can't find us, you're simply not looking hard enough. Ohio State slips past Nebraska. We got Texas escaping Vanderbilt, and LSU blowing it again, it feels like, as Texas A&M comes in with the upset. We got an absolutely packed show for you guys tonight. As always, Alan, it's good to have you in the show, my brother. How have you been since we last went live, man?
I've been doing good. Got a lot of great games to cover today. I'm excited, man.
Yes, sir. Super pumped about it. I know it's only 3 on the slate, but we got some 3 great ones. Like I said, Ohio State, Nebraska, Texas, Vanderbilt, LSU, and Texas A&M. So let's go ahead and kick it right off from the top, man, as we will take that Nebraska, and Ohio State game. Nebraska almost upsets Ohio State. Ohio State does escape with the win here, 21-17. What do you see from this game, man? Give me some of your takeaways from this nail biter for this Ohio State team.
So right off the bat, I want to give credit to Raiola and Matt Rule and because they're getting Nebraska back on the map. They used to be a powerhouse. The Ohio State, Nebraska, and Nebraska, Michigan, that used to be a really good game that everybody looked forward to, and that was the case this year, and I'm really excited about that. But my key takeaway was, I don't know if you feel the same way, but Nebraska was 1 interception away from potentially winning this football game. Right there at the end. Dylan Raiola throws that 1 pick, and it seals the deal right there. And also, I think if they would have scored in the first quarter, we would have a different ball game on our hands.
Yes, a lot of points left on the board for Nebraska. Can agree with you there.
Ohio State, to me, did not play like number 4. I mean, either one of 2 things is true.
Right.
Nebraska is on the cusp of greatness, or Ohio State is suspect. Because the reason I say that is Nebraska's faced 3 top 25 opponents, and we know where they were a couple years ago and even last year. They barely lose to Illinois in overtime. They barely lose this game to Ohio State, the number 4 team in the country. They absolutely get spanked by Indiana, but they've been doing that to everyone. Right. So Ohio State's going to have to worry about Penn State and Indiana. I'm not entirely sold on them. I'm going to be real. At the beginning of the year, the sky was the limit. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not so sure. Kind of like Texas for me. I'm a little we'll get to that a little later, but Will Howard and Carnell Tate really saved Ohio State and the defense.
Yeah. No doubt about it. When you talk about Ohio State's schedule, man, they had a lot of, run-through games that we saw them play earlier this year, but then they have the Oregon game. Clearly, they go to the wire against them. They have this Nebraska game. They go to the wire against them. Of course, they're able to win this game against Nebraska. They drop the 1 to Oregon. Penn State's knocking on the door. They're coming in next. Turn around right afterwards. A couple games later, you got Indiana and then Michigan to end the season. We understand that Michigan is not what they're all cracked up to be, but when you're talking about final game of the year, Ohio State's feeling a little shaky, and it feels like really no team is super out of it, right? So when you see the teams that they're playing coming up on their schedule, man, it's definitely it is definitely something to keep an eye on, because it's like I've talked about with college football in the past, and even as it goes through this season, like you can have the brunt of your schedule, come on the back end, and if you're just blowing out these teams on the front end, you're really going to see what you're made of in the back end of the season. But, I think Nebraska came out about as sloppy as you can in this game. You muffed the opening kickoff inside the 10-yard line. You fumbled a handoff. You shaked a punt, and then it sets OSU up perfectly in plus territory already. But I really wasn't a fan of Ohio State's opening opening drive in this game either, man. It felt really conservative. They get stood up on 4th and 1, so they absolutely squander that drive there. So there were points left on the board. You got Nebraska coming back out. It feels like they set the tone kind of early in this one. They're stuffing the run, stuffing the 4th down, putting the pressure on Will Howard's ass, and it really just felt like they were controlling that line of scrimmage with the number 4 team in the country that you said didn't necessarily felt like they played up to that number 4
Right.
ranking there, considering everything in this game. Now, I thought it was really a defensive showdown to start off as well. Plenty of underneath throws, a lot of short plays. Both of these sides both of these sides of the ball were being fair. Both of these teams offensively were being very conservative. Defense was really stepping up and trying to make some plays as well. Now, I did think Will Howard had, his nice first 2 touchdown passes of the day. And then once they really got that successful run game play off or really established in this one, they'd go over the top, they'd air it out. And, I'd really say if Ohio State didn't squander their first drive, they're up potentially 17-3, maybe 21-3 in this game. And I don't know if you saw this as well, Alan, kind of another testament to them not playing well up to the, the number 4 ranking. It just felt like they really weren't taking advantage of the opportunities that were in front of them. I mean, you had an awful missed field goal. I felt like they were lucky to recover Will Howard's second quarter fumble. And then Nebraska just kept running these low percentage screen plays that Ohio State was snuffing out left and right, really to almost no reasonable avail to take a lead from Nebraska. And again, you have the chance to possibly be up 20-3 or 28-3 when you see how these teams play out. I know you saw the end zone pass interference call that the PI call. These refs just keep barking up these questionable calls. We had another ticky-tack targeting call as well. But again, if you lower the head, if someone's helmet pops back, they're going to literally review it. And it feels like 9 out of 10 times, 99% of the time, they're gonna call it targeting. And then you go in 14-6 at the half. Really far from what this score could have been. Far from what this score could have been.
Absolutely.
And when you look at how it's playing out, Ohio State letting Nebraska hang around in this game by not scoring. Then they throw in almost pick 6. But then Nebraska turns around with the offensive play calling that really was not ideal at all. It wasn't effective as enough as it could have been. They squander another prime field position, really due to ineffective, boring play calls. And this is an Ohio State defense we're talking about here. I understand just 2 weeks ago, they gave up I think it was 2 weeks ago. They had a little bye week. I know this Ohio State defense just gave up almost 500 yards to the number 1 team in the country in Oregon, but they came back and they really stood it up here, not even allowing 250 yards, or I think 280 yards of total offense in this game. Now, you see Nebraska's playbook. Of course, it kind of starts to open up towards the end of the third quarter, but you had the overthrows by Raiola. Of course, you had the interception at the end of the game. So that's something that Ohio State's very thankful for. But I thought Nebraska, Allen, was the more gutsy, the more aggressive team as the game went on. And you kind of saw Matt Rule stepping up to the occasion against Ryan Day. It was really nice to see, man. We really had a show off here. I think one of the biggest things that jumps out to me, though, Ohio State had 64 rushing yards in this game.
Absolutely.
That's with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield. Against a team like Nebraska, who just got blown out by Indiana and had over 200 rushing yards put up by Indiana last week. Now, I understand it's, a little bit of a different, outlook here with these teams, but I think Ohio State having 64 rushing yards is a big thing that, you really take a look at. I thought the best play call of the game, reasonably, was when Quinshon Judkins got that little double move touchdown pass. It kind of made Ohio State feel a little more secure as they were able to get into the end zone. Shout out to the Nebraska defense, though, man. I'm going to talk a little bit about these two defenses here, and then we'll get our final statements before into the next game. Nebraska's defense, 285 total yards of offense, only 64 rushing yards allowed on 31 carries. That's 2.1 yards per carry. In case you didn't know, Quinshon Judkins averages 6.9 yards per carry, and Travion Henderson at 8.2. So these guys had to adjust. Ryan Day had to make these adjustments. The offense had to adjust to what Nebraska's defense was showing them, but then you have Ohio State obviously playing their real big style of, a Big Ten defense as well. After allowing almost 500 yards of offense to Oregon, Ohio State gives up 273 yards of offense to Nebraska, 13 tackles for loss as well. So I think if you look at the bird's eye view of this game and what really happened, I just really thought that, Ohio State left too many points on the board. They kind of got bailed out by Nebraska's bad play calling. And let's be real, Dylan Raiola is a freshman at the end of the day. He is going to have some things to learn in this offensive system. Right, 19 years old. And as he goes through this, college football landscape, it's going to be some things that he has to improve on. Matt Rule's going to go through the growing pains as well. So
Right.
it does feel a little lucky for Ohio State to escape this one, all things considered.
I can agree with you there. One thing I wanted to point out before we get out of here. Number one, the fourth quarter drive where they get the 2-point play. I mean, love that. And then also another thing I wanted to point out. Nebraska did it to themselves. It wasn't necessarily, like you said, the Ohio State defense that held them to field goals. It was Nebraska's fault. And not to mention penalties. They had way too many. They had 7, I believe.
Yep.
And then, but they were doing well on first down, well on third down efficiency. I mean, I think they went 5 for 16 on third down conversions, 18 first downs. I mean, they were playing really good. It didn't work out for them.
Right. Yeah, checking in on those third down conversions here. Nebraska was 5 for 16. Ohio State 1 for 10 on third down, 1 for 12 on fourth down. Kept the penalties kind of low as well. Like you said, Nebraska did have a good bit of penalties in this game, 7-4 for 62 yards, damn near as many penalty yards as rushing yards that
right.
What's it called? Ohio State had in the game. Brian, thank you for the comment as well, man. I was hoping you were going to jump in here tonight.
Awesome comment.
Brian Muck in the comments. He's a huge Ohio State fan. He actually had the blessing of going to that Oregon-Ohio State game, man. They had an absolute blast. Got to see one of the games of the year in Oregon for sure. Texas escapes Vanderbilt 27-24. And before we get into the takeaways, man, let me know who did you learn more about in this game, you feel like? Texas or Vanderbilt?
I'm gonna be a little bit of a contrarian here. I learned more about Texas than I knew previously. Because look, the Georgia game last week, okay, I get it. You're playing the Dogs, one of the best teams in the country.
Right.
Texas was supposed to be one of the best teams in the country. And I'm not saying they still aren't, but what I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this as well, since the oblique injury, Quinn Ewers has not been the same. Like, Texas is barely scraping by opponents now. Like, Vanderbilt beats Alabama. They're high on that. They are really high on that. And I would even reach out and say UGA fans are glad they don't have to play them. Because it could be a trap game. I mean, they did beat Bama. You know, and so I mean that's not nothing, and they got a pretty decent record.
Right,
Pavia is a great.
I'm shocked that Georgia doesn't play Vandy this year. That's actually really surprising.
I know. I
was actually looking forward to it because these dudes are scrappy. I'm like, hey, let's get the redo for the Kentucky game.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, but yeah, I learned way more about Texas, man, because they kept it was a little too close for comfort if you're a Longhorns fan. If you ask me.
Yeah.
I mean, they dominated. Texas did great in yards, passing yards, rushing yards, yards per play. They were killing it, but that score doesn't reflect that at all.
Right. That offensive line was definitely something that we learned a lot about. If I have to talk about, though, who I learned more about in this game, I think I got to say Vanderbilt, man. And Diego Pavia, they literally have a budding superstar maybe at quarterback coming up. You know, they have a close loss to Missouri in double overtime when they were, at number 7 Mizzou earlier in the year. That was after the horrible Georgia State loss, which a lot of people couldn't forgive Vanderbilt for. After they come back and play a close one in double OT to Mizzou, obviously they pull off the biggest upset of the year over number 1 Alabama. They have a good win over Kentucky as well. Of course, they win against Ball State, which they should have, and then they come within just plays from beating Texas as well. And you got to, you got to think, man, this is a Vanderbilt team that this is not the same Vanderbilt team of the past. You know, they're very tough. They're scrappy. Pavia has an arm. He can move around as well. The play calling is, very physical. They are, as well as the quarterback. And I think the play calling, could get a little bit better, no doubt. But this is a Vanderbilt team that I feel like looks pretty promising for the future. Before I get too much into that, like I said, I feel like I did learn more about Vanderbilt. They just will not go away. Maybe we kind of learned already some about that, and we see what Texas' O-line brought or rather didn't bring to the table. But give me some of your takeaways from the Texas game at them escaping Vanderbilt.
So what I really wanted to point out, there was some really crucial mistakes by Vanderbilt early on. I mean, missed tackles. I think there might have been a pick early on in the first half, because I know he threw two, if I'm not mistaken. So did Quinn. But Vanderbilt ultimately outperformed them in the second half.
Oh yeah.
They if they would have played like that the entire game, this would be theirs. Kind of similar to that Ohio State Nebraska game. Like, where was this energy all game long?
Right.
That's penalties were awful too. They were terrible. On
yeah.
both sides. I mean, I think there was
Texas had 10 for
10.
108
Yeah.
yards.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, so I'm not sure how I feel about Texas going forward. My brother's not going to like me saying that, but I mean, because he kind of roots for them part-time, but they just
don't he though?
They have not looked the same since Quinn got injured, man. They're not the same to me. I think somebody's going to come by and exploit them like Georgia did.
Yep.
At some point. And heck, the way Texas A&M's playing, it could be them.
Right. People don't realize that Texas A&M is 5-0 in the SEC. They're at the very top of the SEC standings. They're first right now.
Right. I mean, Commodores ain't got nothing to be mad about. They don't need to be hanging their head right now. They came close to beating Texas, and like I said, they had those two growing pain losses. It happens.
Right.
They're becoming a great football team, kind of like Nebraska. They're on the cusp of that greatness.
Right.
And if Diego Pavia keeps it up, and I think he's got more years of eligibility as well, I think he can be a superstar next year.
Right. Yeah, Pavia looks very solid, and I think he's a big catalyst to this offense for sure. Like we said, Texas escapes Vanderbilt 27-24. Vanderbilt comes out with the early tip ball interception that we're kind of seeing a good bit from Quinn Ewers. He is that younger, not that younger, a little bit of that shorter quarterback throwing low over the top of the line, so you are going to see that happen. But it gave Vanderbilt all the momentum right off the bat. Excuse me, they were almost in the end zone just 3 minutes into the game, and Diego Pavia has an 18-yard touchdown scramble. And I felt like that play literally summed up his competitive spirit in one play. I mean, the dude gets out of pressure, goes around the edge, tiptoes on the inside, literally gets like a centimeter of his cleat inbounds, and then literally hits the pylon as he's diving forward for the rushing touchdown. It was great to see, man. But Texas comes back. They bounce back. Back-to-back scoring drives, and it really looked great going down the field for Texas. Quinn Ewers delivering along the way. Then they get their interception back with their own tip ball, and they score for 3 straight drives. But Vanderbilt, if you notice, they got that second interception, which was another tip from Quinn Ewers. They really needed that because it really was all Texas up until that point, not really making it much of a game up until then. And then you get a defensive pass interference from Texas as well. Diego Pavia, maybe with the luckiest play that he's had for Vanderbilt, one of the luckiest plays of the year, somehow threads multiple needles on the touchdown pass as he's running to his right. Thought it was a really, really lucky play, like I said, if I'm being honest. Now, Diego Pavia made a really bad mistake in this game as well. His second interception, it literally looked as if he was a freshman. I literally had to go to ESPN and see how many years this guy has been playing. For a third-year player, that second interception was just absolutely inexcusable. Vanderbilt's defense in the game, though, backed up against the wall after, the interception, the bad interception from Pavia that almost gets ran back for a touchdown, and they forced the field goal on Texas. So Vanderbilt, again, learning about them, one of those teams, excuse me, they'll push around on you. They will make you play left-handed. They will try to take your best characteristics away from you. And I think Vanderbilt's done a good job at that over the last month or so, really gaining a lot of that hype after beating number 1 Alabama. You did have a pick 6 that got called back on Texas. I really thought that changed the game. The way that this game looked on the final score. Roughing the passer brings it back, and then you see Texas let Vanderbilt hang around in this game as well. So it really could have been a little uglier for Texas here. But again, with that pick 6 getting called back, it's going to change the way that the box score looked. I kind of thought, though, that Vanderbilt also was lucky to be in this ball game. They should have thrown a pick 6. They had 2 picks early. They had a lucky touchdown pass. Texas stalls after settling for a field goal after being inside the 5 from the Diego Pavia interception, where Vanderbilt stands up with their backs on the wall. Thought that was a big turning point in the game as well. Both of Quinn Ewers' interceptions turned into 14 of 24 points for Vanderbilt. And like you said, ever since Quinn's been hurt, he's not been looking super solid. And whenever you have your turnovers directly contribute to the other team's points, it's not going to be something amazing to look at. We mentioned the 10 penalties for 108 yards on Texas as well. I got to admit, man, I think the Georgia Bulldogs really broke the Texas offensive line. 5 holdings, 2 false starts, 4 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, which really translates to 7 drive-killing penalties, and then the defense chipped in on 3 more. I'll say that again. They gave up multiple sacks in the Georgia game, 7, if I'm not mistaken. In this game, 5 holdings, 2 false starts, 4 sacks, 9 TFLs. So this offensive line is not improving at all, and it has not improved since the Georgia game. You want to look at the couple of defensive penalties as well. You had 2 key penalties in the second half that really let Vanderbilt get back into this game. Roughing the passer ended up turning into the targeting call. That led to Vanderbilt's last touchdown. Took away an interception, and Vanderbilt scored their final touchdown of the day on the drive. Malik Muhammad had a pass interference that also resulted in a touchdown too. That pass interference was on 4th down. It kept the drive alive, and then that touchdown, of course, would also come on a 4th down as well. And that O-line is going to be a problem to go through this year, man. Let's just call it what it is. That O-line is going to be something that Texas has to snuff up on. When you're talking about double-digit sacks in the last 2 weeks, when you're talking about 9 TFLs in one game, that's not going to be something that is a sustainable thing. That's something that Sark's going to have to clean up on. You're going to have to see these offensive linemen really gel with each other. And you might even have to start chipping a little bit and taking some of your talented players, which isn't a super advantageous thing when you have talented guys like Golden, like Bond, like Bolden on the team. But if you start needing help chipping on the edges, what more can you do than to protect your guy like Quinn Ewers, who, again, once he dealt with that oblique injury, you're a little brittle around him. You want to make sure that you can protect him. You are talking about the Texas Longhorns, who've been the best that they've been in almost 20 years, and they have national championship aspirations.
Yes, they do.
When you roll out an offensive line like that for 2 weeks in a row, it's going to be tough. It's not a good look at all. I want to check Texas's schedule coming up. They've got Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and then the last game of the year, Texas A&M. That's one to keep an eye on. Because we're about to talk about Texas A&M playing against LSU. Nick Scourton, who just went off in the TAM game against LSU, he's going to smell blood in the water in the Texas game.
You ain't kidding.
They're going to smell blood in the water when they play Kentucky as well. Now, they do get to play Kentucky at home, but they're in College Station on the last game of the year in the SEC. That could possibly be for a spot in the SEC championship against potentially Georgia. There's going to be a big game for them. So, give me a scale of 1 to 10 confidence rating for you, watching Texas walk through the rest of this year. Are you confident that this team can be as they were advertised before they met the Georgia Bulldogs?
I don't think they will be on brand as to what they were advertised before Georgia. I think, like you said, it sucked a little bit of life out of them. But I do think they get through the remainder of the schedule fairly easy. Now, Arkansas could be a trap game because people have lost to them. I think it was Tennessee, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yeah, they did. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so you got to worry about Arkansas just a little bit. Kentucky, maybe not.
Right. But enough to push you around, though. Enough to make you nervous.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And depending on where they're playing, too.
Right.
If they play at Kroger Field, it's going to be a little weird. But not to say Texas doesn't bounce back from this either.
Right.
They could go to the lab and correct everything that went wrong, especially with the line. But I'm not going to bash Texas too terribly much. I'm going to give them 2 compliments. Brent Auburn, great field goal kicker. I mean, he got him 6 points in this game. And DeAndre Moore Jr. Focus on them guys. Especially DeAndre Moore. He had 2 touchdowns. He had 97 yards.
Right.
Get that guy the ball more.
Right.
Seriously, target him.
Got to. Sark's got to keep an eye on that.
But yeah, I think they don't have too much to worry about until the Texas A&M game, and then they could potentially be 2-loss team.
Yeah, and I'll just say this: with the way that Texas and Texas A&M are playing right now, I might give a slight nod to Texas A&M in that game.
I would agree with you.
That's going to be a fun one to watch. It's a month from today. We know the last 4 or 5 weeks of college football are going to be amazing. All 12, 13, 14 weeks of the regular season are going to be great. The first 9, 10 weeks have been fantastic as well. So, I know you and I as fans, we couldn't be more grateful to see how the season is playing out. LSU comes out hot. It feels like they blow it again against Texas A&M as number 14? Yes, Texas A&M upsets number 8 LSU 38-23. Give me some of your takeaways on this one, man, because this is another disappointing Brian Kelly loss. You feel like LSU is in the driver's seat. They go up big, they go up quick, and they just can't do anything with it. And I don't know if we can feel any sort of confidence in this LSU team.
I would agree with you. They had it in the bag in the first half, 17-0.
Yeah.
I mean, they had it in the palm of their hand in Cal Field, right?
Yep.
Third largest attendance. Third largest attendance, 103,000 people out there.
Ever?
Yeah.
Damn.
That's what I read. And I actually saw it on the game.
100,000 people at a football game. That's just nuts, dude.
Yeah, Cal Field's huge.
Yeah.
They are out there banking on, Reveille's out there counting on them. And they're down 17-0 going into the locker room. I don't know what Mike Elko said, and I've been high on him all year. I've been they hired the right guy. I've been adamant about that since the year started because of his performance at Duke last year. The momentum shifted, and I'll give you 2 words: Marcel Reed.
Oh yeah, no game plan for that guy.
No game plan whatsoever.
No game plan for that dude.
3 touchdowns, my guy. I mean, shoot. They're showing why they are top of SEC in conference play. I mean, with that win, and like you said, I'm disappointed in Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
I'm highly disappointed in Brian Kelly and what he's doing. Like you said, he had it in the palm
It's just
of
another
his hand.
hack job at coaching. It's just another failed opportunity for Garrett Nussmeier, as much as I do like the guy at quarterback.
Yeah, I do too. But Marcel comes in for Connor Wegman. He's not doing too well, and coaches count on him, and he delivered.
Yep.
That's pretty much all I got to say about it.
Yeah, Mike Elko, definitely the right hire for them. It's gutsy when you pull a guy like Connor Wegman. I think he was 6 for 14, less than 50 or 60 yards in the first half. There was just no offensive spark whatsoever. Yards. Yeah, and Mike Elko comes in, throws in the true dual threat quarterback, redshirt freshman, and Marcel Reed, and they go on 5 straight scoring drives, and kind of just the rest is history in this game. And it's sad because LSU came out big time in this game. Like you said, they go up 10-0 quickly. They're up 17-7 at the half off of a big 76-yard touchdown catch and run. I thought they really needed a touchdown on the first drive in this game as well. It seems like all 3 games that we're talking about today, whether they were close or not, just came down to a couple plays. We know this is a game of inches. It's the details really matter, but leaving points on the board definitely felt like it was a characteristic of some of these games this weekend. I thought they were moving the ball very well, and even Peyton Durham had a very key part in that as well. But when you don't hit the 2 field goals in the first half for LSU, along with no touchdown on the first drive, you can't help but grieve over points that are left off the board for this team. You have a chance to be up by 20.
Right.
2-0 at the half, possibly. And then you get absolutely outscored in the second half, 31-6. I thought, like I said, I thought Nussmeier was playing well. He was putting on a little bit of a show until he threw the awful interception that really put Texas A&M right back in the game. And it just really went downhill after that. He threw another awful second INT and a third INT all in the second half. You had the third botched field goal for LSU, and it just, kept the woes going in this game. I mean, the snapper's not looking, snaps the ball into his helmet. The kicker's looking up at the play clock. I mean, these guys just, they weren't in sync. They weren't tuned in. I don't know if you can exactly, look at Brian Kelly for that, or if you take a look at your special teams coordinator, probably the latter for sure. But, if there was a growing theme in this game, it was LSU could not stop the big run plays in the second half, whether it was Le'Veon Moss, whether it was Marcel Reed. They were just chewing up the Tigers on the ground. I mean, Marcel Reed comes in again, 3 rushing touchdowns on the day, 5 straight scoring drives for Texas A&M in this game.
Yep.
Outscore LSU 31-6 in the second half. And it just shows you, again, when you see, that a guy like Mike Elko was able to not only deal with a bad quarterback play, but also, pull that quarterback, put a guy in who's a dual threat, lean on the running game like they have been, which is damn near turning a lead at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're a newer coach. You're down big. You could have been down even bigger, but you adjust. You get in this game. You have 5 straight scoring drives, but that's not the case for Brian Kelly because you don't adjust. You had no game plan for the redshirt freshman quarterback who was dual threading you to death, and you had no answer literally for the 5 straight scoring drives. I'll just sum up the game in one statement for LSU.
Hey.
They gave up 242 rushing yards to Texas A&M, and they've leaned on it all year. I mean, the run game is downright elite, bro. Am I wrong?
It is, and I will sum it up for you in one statement. In the second half, LSU looked about as lost as their placeholder during that missed snap. That's what they looked like.
They were what?
I said they looked about as lost in the second half as their placeholder when he missed that snap.
Yeah.
Brian Kelly looked like a deer in headlights.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I don't like to, you know, kind of take the mainstream vibe and pick on the coach like everyone is, but you got people out here calling Brian Kelly a fraud. You know, this could have possibly been a get-right game for both teams. And, well, not even a get-right game, but LSU, the way the game started, it was LSU's game to win. It was all LSU in the first half, all Texas A&M in the second half. And when you don't have a plan for a quarterback that's going to come in and play that way, it's going to hurt you. Entering the game, LSU's offensive line had allowed just 2 sacks in the first half against A&M's pass rush. Nussmeier was pressured, but he still had time to get through his progressions. However, as you got through the game in the second half, LSU's O-line did break down. They got 2 sacks on him in just this game, 6 tackles for loss, 3 second-half interceptions. Obviously, Nick Scorton leading the way. One of the 2 sacks. He had a team-high 6 quarterback hurries for a total of 19 hurries on Garrett Nussmeier for the day. You look at Texas A&M going down the line as well. Over the next 4 games, that defensive line isn't going to necessarily play big-time O-line competition, including Texas in the very last game of the year, like we just talked about. They sustained 4 sacks from Vanderbilt as well. And let's just look at Texas A&M's schedule, man, as we go down the line, because you have to ask an honest question. Do you risk, with being first in the SEC and knowing how Connor Weigman just did not play well against an LSU team that clearly didn't have a defense that could stop an offense when you put it together? Answer this for me. Do you risk Connor Weigman going back in, or do you give the job to Marcel Reed for the rest of the year? Because you got South Carolina, New Mexico State, Auburn, and Texas.
Yeah.
I don't think those are any slouches for Texas A&M to finish the year outside of New Mexico State. And let's just be real. Everybody's playing hard this year, Alan.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the SEC, man. I mean, we're seeing, like I mentioned earlier, like that Tennessee-Arkansas game. We're seeing weird stuff like that happen. So, I don't think you risk it. I really don't. But ultimately, it is up to Mike. I mean, to see what they want to do going forward. And I won't be shocked if he does put Weigman back in early on. Let's say in the first half of the South Carolina game, just to get a feel for how he's doing. But if there's any sign of struggle, I think he pulls him. I definitely do, because you cannot risk it. You're about to get to
first
the
in the
SEC.
Yes, you are about to walk into the SEC title game if you can just win out, run the table, and you're there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And even if you do lose in the SEC championship, you're probably going to go to the 12 team at that point.
Right.
Probably. I mean, you're good enough to. So I also wanted to fact check myself on something real quick. So
go for it. You got it.
The third largest attendance at Texas A&M, Kyle Field, was 108,852 for the football game, and they only have a capacity of about 103.
Yeah, that's crazy to know that there was over 5,000 people in the standing room. Brian, I saw your comment earlier. Isn't that normal to have 100K plus? Yeah, it is in college, but when you just think about 100,000 fans in one building, it wouldn't be the same if it was the NFL. Right. It wouldn't be the same in the NFL. We've talked about the pageantry, the traditions, but over 100,000 fans in one stadium, it'll never cease to amaze me. You know what I mean? Right. Because you don't see that every game. It is normal when you have these big time home games for Ohio State, Texas A&M, Texas, Georgia, you know, whatever the case is. But yeah, it definitely still blows my mind. I'm with you though, man. You can't risk it. You cannot risk it with the way that Texas A&M is playing right now. Say again.
I said them black uniforms were slick. They meant
Yeah,
business,
they
huh?
were. They were very slick. I really don't think you can risk it. I'll be honest, I haven't been super interested in Texas A&M this year, but this game kind of put something in my eyes, again,
Right.
and I'm not
Same.
really high on ISU, LSU either, because I do think they gaffed this one away. They choke job this one away. But I don't think you can risk it with the position Texas A&M is in right now. Again, 5-0, undefeated, first in the SEC. Run the
Yep.
table and you're in. You're playing Georgia. You're playing whoever it might be in the SEC title game. Maybe on the
Correct.
next episode we'll be able to predict who we got winning each of these. What's it called? Michigan Big House and Beaver Stadium for Penn State. Yeah, absolutely. If there's any sort of really tradition with these teams in the NCAA, you're going to have a packed out stadium of over 100,000 people.
Right. Absolutely.
That was episode 79 of the NFL with AJL. I appreciate the heck out of everybody jumping into tonight's show for the back-to-back podcast evenings that we did. Throw you guys the double A. We went over Ohio State slipping past Nebraska, Texas escaping Vanderbilt, and LSU blowing it to get upset by Texas A&M. As always, before you guys get out of here, please make sure to like and share the stream. Wherever you may be watching, hit the bell on YouTube so you don't miss a post. Subscribe to the channel as well. We're almost at 1,000 subs. You guys get us to 1,000 subs, we will activate the monetization for the channel, which will let us get back to you guys in an even bigger way. As always, the QR code, as Alan pointed to, is the best way to find every bit of social media and podcast content at the NFL with AJL. If you can't find us, you're simply not looking hard enough. Alan, it was a great time having you on, bro. It was an excellent episode. I love chopping up these games. Guys, you already know we're going to be back next week with more NFL, more college football content as well. Love you guys, see you guys, and need you guys, and we will see y'all in episodes 80